we're recording this
Okay.
episode together.
All
One,
right.
two, three. Green
Green
light.
light. Send it over and then we'll figure it out.
Yes.
Oh. Ooh wee. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Yeasayers podcast. Thank you for checking this out. This is our first episode. This is what we're doing. We're just jumping into it, Priya. Let's just jump
We're
into
jumping in. We're jumping into it. Alex is sick. I am not. So this is going to be a fun ride.
Great first episode of the podcast. Well, 1.5. 1.5.
1.5. We recorded before and we decided to record again. Welcome
Bumper
to
sticker.
Yeasayers.
Well,
Bumper
Yeasayer podcast. The first episode, we're reading the book Greenlights by Mathew McConaughey and taking that and looking into like what stood out about him as a person in his memoir and his book and his autobiography. And what did they do? What did he do in his life to succeed? And to generally talk about how we learned from him and how we figured that, like what we took away from this wonderful set of words put together in book form.
Yes. And why? And why do we want to do this? Since this is episode one.
Correct. You're right.
Right. I know for both of us, and we've chatted about this for a bit, it's like I feel like we're both at this transition point in our lives, and people hit multiple transition points. I don't know which transition this is for me, probably like number 157 or something like that. but
Priya, are you
but
okay?
I'm good. Are you okay?
Just a little sniffly. Are you okay? Are you gaslighting me? It's green light, not gaslight. Okay.
No, because you did this. Priya, are you okay?
Make
I
fun
was
of the
like, wait a
sick
minute.
kid. Uh-huh.
Wait a minute, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, back to gaslighting, just kidding, green lighting. So yeah, I think we're both at this like transition point where we're exploring, and it sounds like you have some latest insights, which I would love to hear more about too as a part of this episode in terms of what you want to do next. Um, yes, but long story short, Alex and I both met at work,
Yeah.
and
At the water cooler.
at the water cooler. We ran water cooler parties. It was fantastic. That's not
It's
actually
great.
what we did for a living, but
It's
but
what
yeah,
people think we did for a living.
we met at work, and we're both at this time in our lives now where we're figuring out like where our paths are headed next. I think a lot of in terms of career. We're both very creative. Something that, and we'll talk about green lights, we'll talk about Matthew McConaughey. Something that stood out to me about him as well is that he can find an angle on almost anything at one point. And I feel like very similar to that, where there's a number of things that I can take on. But at this point, it's sort of like I've been working for 15 or 16 years. Like, what do I truly want to do next? Like, where do I want to go? And I think also to both of us, being good at what we do while having fun with it and doing something that's right for us and brings value to other people is really important. So, we're here to learn about people who have made it,
Mm-hmm.
people who are successful, and what sorts of challenges did they go through? How did they get to where they are? What's been their approach in life? And hopefully learning some lessons from them that we can then apply to ourselves and share those insights with everybody who tunes in.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Priya said it best. Is we really are in like different transitional periods. A lot has happened in these last couple months, and taking the time to just like, I mean, we stayed in touch, and that was the thing. Is we knew we wanted to do something and wanted to chat a little bit, and really kind of we are the same. What is it? ENFP T.
Yes.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
both have a lot of the same mentality around things, and we both like kind of deep diving and analyzing the way that people work and the things that we can learn from them and how that all can contribute to our own lives. So taking the time to read these books and read these memoirs and read these autobiographies and take the life lessons that others have already walked, the walks that people have already walked, and being able to see that and read it and understand their feelings of this, and then implementing that into your own life is like, it's like the cheat code of life. And I think a lot of people don't take advantage of it. And since we enjoy doing that, so might as well broadcast it and hold ourselves accountable with it, and continue to do it on like a weekly basis, and really try to just check in on it. I feel like I don't know, for me, if this as this continues on, it'll be kind of like it'll be literally the holding accountable thing.
I know. I was just thinking
It
that as you
literally
were
what it
saying, this
is.
is like
Yeah.
that's why I like what we did in our recording 1.0 as well. So this is
Yeah.
our second time recording this episode, but I love Greenlights so much that I could literally record hundreds of episodes on it. I
I
know.
don't understand. Like, okay, the book
I'm
was
like,
good.
why
Like,
do
don't
you
get
love
me wrong.
that?
I'm really concerned as to why you love this book so much. Like,
You're
you're like
concerned?
all,
Why are you concerned? Why would
I
that be
don't
the one
know,
that you
because it's
pick?
freaking Mathew McConaughey. He's the dude that
Oh,
came on. He was all right, all right, all right, and then, like, you're like,
but
this
what does
book
that have to
changed
do
my life.
what
The
does that
green
have to
light.
do with anything? Like, it's the material and the content you
Oh,
produce, right?
sure,
I don't
sure, sure.
care who it
Right.
comes from.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh
I
my
hope you're like
God.
this with every single book that we read. I hope you're like,
Maybe.
I absolutely love this.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, so I could do a lot of episodes on this, and I was just thinking today, like this morning, it is still morning for me, but I was thinking that I need to read the book again and like gather all the thoughts that I have around it. But why did I like it so much? I just feel, honestly, I feel like there's a wealth of lessons in here. And
Mm,
I feel like you can learn from people who are like you, but then you also learn a lot from people who are not like you. And I feel like there's the perfect mix of both in the approach in this book, where it's kind of like, at least how he explains things, it's grounded in some sort of spiritual truths and foundation that I also live by or agree with. But then the way that he has um, faced in his encounters, his challenges, his different like growth points in life are perhaps different from
mm,
how I do things. So there's that base foundation that, I resonate with, but then these alternate approaches that I really feel like are valuable, a valuable addition to my own like tool set of how I navigate life. And so we can get into, introducing this book and what it is. Obviously,
sure.
we mentioned we're talking about Matthew McConaughey. I'm sure everybody knows who that is, so we won't describe
And if
him.
not, he's an actor who has acted in many Oscar-nominated films. He's won an Oscar himself, a bunch of I believe probably a couple Golden Globes, whatever. Uh,
Whatever.
Whatever, whichever. There's a bunch of them. There's so many. I think there's probably only like 2 award shows, isn't there? Is it Golden Globes and Oscars? Is that what that is? Is there another
I
one
think,
other than
uh,
the Emmys? But that's
right.
for TV. I don't know if he
Yeah.
was in a TV shows. Anyways, either way, Matthew McConaughey, actor,
I think
big
he
actor,
was. He was in,
social advocate,
yes. Oh, social
social
advocate.
change
Okay.
advocate as well. He does a lot of philanthropy. He ran
And
for governor, I think, or he
I
tried
would
to.
say, right, I would say proud Texan, it seems like. But
Proud Texan. Oh yeah. All right, all right, all right.
Oh, so okay, so before we introduce the book, or as a part of that, I've had a couple of funny coincidences happen while we were meant, you know, while we had decided to read this book and record the episode. First
Uh-huh.
one is the last time I mentioned is that the night before we were going to record, I just randomly turned on the TV. I was waiting for something, and the first thing I saw was Matthew McConaughey in Contact, which I forgot he was even in that movie,
Hmm.
playing alongside Jodie Foster. And when I continued reading the book, there was this one quote that stood out to me. And it's we might talk about it later in the episode, maybe not, but there's this time after he, the first time he became famous and he made it big, he talks about how he um, needed sort of like realignment. And so he goes into actually the Amazon to chase a dream that he had.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
And there's one thing that his guide in Spanish says to him when he's there, like right when he feels like he's finally unblocked, sort of those issues, inner turmoil and the issues that he was facing at the time. And his guide says to him, "You are light, Matthew. You are light." I recently picked up this shirt and I don't know why. And it's a shirt that I'm wearing and it says, "You are the light of the world." And it's like a scripture. I'm not into scripture really that much, but and then it says, because it's from Matthew 5:14. And yeah, I was reading that quote. I'm like, oh, okay, like
that
some
makes me
points
think that
that
he just made that shit up. Now that
I know, no, oh yeah.
this whole book is just one big lie. Is one big lie.
He is an
Oh,
actor,
he
so,
is. He is. Um.
Anyway,
Anyways,
anyway, so I feel like, this book, I feel like I had a green light, a couple of green lights to read this book and to talk about it. But I know that you are the one who came up initially with the idea to cover this book because you had already read it before, right? Or
correct.
listened to it. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I'd only do audiobooks. If I read it, I'd still be reading it, and I'd still be reading it for about a year.
Which
So.
is why I'm still reading it.
Oh, yeah, there. See, you got to get on Audible. Come on, you got to get on. Not sponsored, but still, you got to get on Audible. That shit makes it a lot easier. Yeah. I mean, I've read this book. I read this book. When did I read this or listen to it? I read it like a year ago, I believe, when it first came out. It was the guys that I was listening to another podcast like to make fun of him, just like poke jokes at him. So when his book came out, it was like, oh, we should read his book, blah blah blah, and I was like, you know what, I'll read the book. And it was pretty good. I especially being a dude that's going through my 20s right now, and being able to kind of like anybody who puts their life out for the world to see and kind of pinpoints the not just the good things
And
but the
hopefully
bad
it's not
things.
all a lie.
Yeah, and hopefully that's not all a lie, and it's not just something that something
Coming
that
from the Bible.
I mean, yeah, what if that this is just a joke on people that never read the Bible. These are all just Bible verses and like stories from the Bible. That's funny. Um but being that if they're all real, it's nice to just like I don't know. Again, anybody puts their life out on just like for the world to see, and just like goes through all the good and the bad, and shows all the lessons learned, and just like the mindset going through everything. It allows you to kind of secondhand experience those things, and you make your own decisions and understand why the consequences happen that way. So if you are to face one of those situations yourself, you kind of have experienced it to some extent before, or like have a prior. So especially
And
like I
he
said, being
calls it that. He calls it that. He calls his book an approach book. He says it's not a traditional memoir, but it's a playbook based on the adventures he's had in his life. And so he like basically says, "Hey, I'm not perfect. I step in shit all the time, and this is my a description of how I've learned to navigate the shit that I step in and turning it into good luck, figuring out how to do it less often, and facing more green lights rather than red or yellow lights and turning them into green lights." So yeah, essentially, like, I think this is an attempt for him too to not only talk about the stuff that's happened in his life, the adventures as he calls it, which is how they come
Mhm,
across in the book as well,
mhm.
but also to share that approach that comes with him. And he calls it the art of living, right?
Art of living,
The art of
Livin.
living. um, but maybe we can talk about a little bit about what green light is. Like, how would you describe a green light, and why do you think he called his book that?
Sure. I mean, a green light is like in reference to a traffic light. like when the green light says green light means go. So it's these points in life, and correct me if you think it's something different, but it's my take was that it's these points in life where opportunities open themselves to you, or certain like certain situations happen that kind of point you in a certain direction, and you just ride through it. You got to keep going through, like you see that and you acknowledge it. It's those points when you acknowledge it and you really notice all the little things, whether it be in the moment or a little bit after the fact, that like these things really kind of shape your movement through life. And the green lights portion is, I would assume, I would say positive. It's like a positive way of moving you, or like it's continuing that momentum. It's like it's not stopping you. It's not hindering you from continuing your life in any way, or like it seemed to always be something that would lead to the next better thing, that'll teach you something, or uh, a new approach or whatever. So that's how I see green
Yeah.
lights.
I love that interpretation. And I also like, so you said riding the green light. When I first was, thinking about green lights and the way that he described them, to me it reminded me of surfing. Like the idea of surfing, you're catching a wave and then you're riding the wave. Like you're catching a
Hmm.
green light and you're riding the green light. And I also liked what you said about momentum, because the red and the yellow lights in our lives are moments where it's almost like the momentum has paused or has stopped, and it feels like everything is a struggle. So what do you do at that point? And I'm big on sort of like, reminding myself of the passages from the book. So I have here what he calls a green light. So maybe we can look through that real quickly. But green lights mean go, advance, carry on, continue. On the road, they are set up to give the flow of traffic the right of way. They say proceed. In our lives, they are an affirmation of our way. Their approval, support, praise, gifts, gas on our fire, attaboys, and appetites. Their cash money, birth, springtime, health, success, joy, sustainability, innocence, and fresh starts. We love green lights. They say yes and give us what we want. But he says that they can also be disguised as yellow and red lights. So, a caution, a detour, a thoughtful pause, an interruption, a disagreement, indigestion, sickness, and pain. We're kind of sick right now, but the yellow light.
Yeah, my red
A,
light.
a red light, a full stop, a jackknife, an intervention, failure, suffering, a slap in the face, or death. We don't like yellow and red lights. They slow us down or stop our flow. They're hard. They say no, but sometimes they give us what we need. This is a book about how to catch more yeses in a world of no's, and how to recognize when a no might actually be a yes. So, the art, skill, and timing of catching and creating green lights.
I think he does that really well throughout, and he kind of it's funny to watch him as he grows up and goes through his life, to like see how he recognizes these green lights in his life. And I don't know if he noticed it throughout the process, or if he's noticing it now as he wrote the book and like called it green lights and like this is what they were, but he like recognized them as something. It's interesting to see that he like continued to put himself in more and more situations that would change the course of his life, or change like the perspective or anything like that. And so I just found that interesting. I found that interesting that
I think
it just showed.
that's super interesting. And I love what you said, like he puts himself in situations to catch more green lights. And that's in and of itself is a big takeaway for me. And it has to do with something that we were talking about at the very beginning, before we actually even started recording this episode, when we were recapping from the last time that we recorded.
Hmm.
Um, but this idea of like not waiting for approval, but putting yourself in a position
Yeah.
to get what you want and to go for what you want, and being sort of like fearless in that. So I'm curious about like what you maybe noticed from him. And I think you just mentioned that the book sort of happens in a chronological order. So it
Hmm.
starts when he's really young and he talks about his parents, what they were like, what his upbringing was like, where he lived, all of that stuff. And then we see him evolve over time as he first is studying to become a lawyer.
Mhm.
Um, and then decides he wants to go to film school and then sort of falls into acting, and then evolves, moving forward, and finally has like discovered, like gets that fame and then figures out how to manage that and then moves forward and forward.
I mean, I feel
um
like it all starts with his we talked about this in the 1.0 episode, but
yeah.
the fun thing to look at is his parents literally created this perfect machine of like a
Mm,
workhorse, with how arrogant his mom was, in the way that like she just like does what she wants. If she wants it, it's hers, and she does not care. I don't know if arrogant is the right word, but like, because it could be, it's a little aggressive. But like there was the story of like, if the poem, what was
the
it like?
poem, yes, that's
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
story that goes.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
if it resonates with you, it's yours. It's like, that's not how that works. But
So
in
let's
her
recap
mind,
for everybody what happened then. So I
sure,
think
do for it.
Matthew's in grade school, right?
Uh huh.
And there's a poetry contest. And I feel like after reading his book, like I feel like he probably was pretty good at that sort of thing, even
Uh
as a
huh.
child. Like you get that
Yeah,
feeling,
you would
right?
think. Yeah.
Yeah, you would think. And so he's submitting something to this poetry contest, and he's like in his room or whatever, you know, working on his poem at home, and then I think he brings it out and shows his mom, and his mom's like, oh, that's
Not
just
good enough.
great, but like, but
Yeah.
not, yeah, like continue work, keep working on it. And then he goes back, he works on it, and he comes back to show her, and she reads it, and she pulls out another poem from the drawer of like the fridge or something.
Hmm.
And I forgot what the poem is at this point, but
Hold
it's
on,
like
hold on. Why did you say it from the fridge? She just pulls out
because
a poem from the
no, well,
fridge.
sometimes you have them posted on the fridge, right? I don't know. I have these weird visuals that are
In the
probably not
drawer
at all
from the fridge.
accurate
And
about,
I'm
yeah.
like, it's sitting next to the apples
Or the
inside the fridge.
like, I feel like it said something like that.
No,
I'll look it up
you're
later.
probably yeah.
The drawer, poem from the drawer. Um, so the mother pulls out this poem, and she's like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And he reads the poem, and he's like, "Oh, this is a great poem." And she says something like, "Well, do you believe it, or do you resonate with it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, turn this into the contest."
It's
And
yours.
it's yours. And
Yeah.
he's like, "What? But I didn't write it. This other person wrote it." He's like, "But does it make sense to you? Like, do you like it? Do you?" And he's
Do
like,
the
"Yeah."
words resonate? Yeah.
Do the words resonate? She's like, "Well, then it's yours." And so, like you were saying, and then of course he submits that poem,
Uh huh.
and he wins
He
the
wins. Yeah,
contest,
of course he wins.
right?
Green light.
And green light. So in the entire book, he's like says green light throughout the
uh,
book at like moments of green light, which we should do in our lives. Hey,
no.
let's do it now. We're recording this
Okay.
episode together.
All
One,
right.
two, three. Green
Green
light.
light.
Yeah.
Oh, are we gonna sing it? Are we supposed to say green
Oh, we're singing?
light?
I didn't know I
No,
was
that's what
singing.
I don't know.
Oh,
You
okay.
you you hit perfect tone. I was like,
Oh,
damn, Priya,
wow. That's
okay.
a first. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. I was like,
Nice.
gotta bring my A game.
Nice, nice.
But
So yeah, so back to kind of why you brought that up is that from an early age, he was given the green light, even from his parents, to like go unabashedly for what he wants. And I think to take risks as well. Of course,
mhm.
we don't advocate plagiarism, right?
Of course,
But
yeah.
yeah, but it was that sort of mentality, like you, and I think his parents also sort of like supporting him in that he can do what he wants. I feel like they never made him feel like he wasn't capable. It was always the
Yeah.
opposite. Like there's that other example from his childhood where he thought that he won some other contest.
Oh, like the little
Yes.
Mister, the Texas or something. Yeah, and he was running up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole his like several years he thought he won, and he had this big trophy. And finally, like later on, he looked at the trophy many years later, and it actually said runner up,
Mm-hmm.
not the winner.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom was like, "Oh, I just wanted to make you feel like you won, like because you did." Oh, something about the
No,
first.
it's because the person in first was like rich and
Oh,
they
yeah,
bought
yeah.
them a special like suit and stuff like that. And she was like, "That's not
Mm,
fair. So you won." And she was very dead serious about it. And I think that even just that mentality, coupled with his dad's mentality of being just like this bullheaded, you got to fight for what you want to do,
yes.
like don't give a shit, like very masculine man. Like that coupled together was like that set up him and his brothers for some a wild future of just getting whatever, like not getting what they want but going after what they want and like
Going
continuing to do so.
after it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even his brother was this golf champion, right? You said?
Was he? I didn't know
I
if he was
think
a golf champion, but I know he played golf.
it said that he made, like, he became a millionaire. It is when
I
Matthew was
thought it
still
was
in
because of
law
his
school or
I
something.
thought it was because of his business. I thought his business did that. I don't know. Maybe we didn't actually read the book well enough.
Maybe not.
Just kidding.
That's what I was telling you. I need to read it again. And you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
laughing
Just
at me.
just
You
so
were
you know,
laughing in
just
my
so you know
face.
those specific points. Just so you know
Yes.
if he's a PGA golf champion or
Must be
he.
100% accurate. I was just
Correct,
kidding.
correct. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that we talked about this before, but it's that forward momentum, that like
Yes.
hustle, that recognizing what you want and then going for it,
I
regardless
th-
of what other people are telling you.
I think the big one was don't half-ass it either. And that was
Yeah.
something that kind of like and there was a pivoting point at least in the beginning of it where he had to call his dad to tell him that he wanted to no longer do be a lawyer. He wouldn't didn't want to do law school anymore and he wanted to go to film school. And being
Mm.
that big of a like the whole time he was growing up, it was like he's going to be the family lawyer. It's going to be like the thing. Um and he finally like, he makes that transition late like in the middle of his college career and just being able to have that conversation with his dad and his dad literally just saying, well, if you're going to do it, don't half-ass it. Like it's an approval and that's a green light in and of itself, but it's also a nice little word of wisdom of being like, well, if you're going to do this and you're going to take a change in your life and you're going to like fuck everything up and like change everything to like to figuring that whole thing out, do it right. Like then go all in. Don't half-ass it.
Yeah. Um, and so we're talking about sort of like upbringing and responses to things, and how that helped him navigate these decision points. What has it been like for you? I mean, like, is there, what do you learn for yourself from that? I can say from my example, I know there's been certain points like that in my life, and I feel like in some ways definitely there's a lot of confidence placed in my ability to do great things, but then
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand too, maybe the things that I wanted from my heart weren't always celebrated or like supported fully. And so it was kind of like are you sure you know what you want? Or like, are you sure this is right? Or this is not, what you're saying is not right. Like, this is right. This is the right way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's been a source of sort of inner conflict for me that prevents me from just being like, this is what I want. I'm going to acknowledge that and I'm going to go for that thing. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious about what it was like for you and where maybe the learning points are for you from this sort of part of the book or these instances that happen with Matthew.
No, it's kind of the same thing. There, growing up, I wanted to go for film, and I
Mm,
technically wanted to be a YouTuber. So, doing my own short films and such, and then trying to apply for college. My family was very supportive of it, but at the same time, it wasn't like a supportive where they would sit down and help me with videos or like watch them and go through it and like do that whole thing. It was more of like, well, if it's what you want to do, go for it like and like as long as I knew the little pieces of it, and if I could get a job, if things happen like that, just being very like asking the generic questions of like, will this allow you to live? And That mentality, it was nice to have that, and like the door like opened for you, but
Hmm.
it's like it wasn't the same, and it does still cause conflict of like of it's more of the questioning instead of just saying like go for it, do it, we'll help you, let's figure it out. um it's set in a nice little thing, like a lot of questioning, a lot of um, second guessing what I'm gonna do and where I do
Yeah.
it. So a big problem that I tend to have is I tend to talk about a lot of the things that I want to do to see, and it's something that actually I learned like was a big problem. Maybe it's also like kind of goes in hand with one of the quotes from the book of like it was it more involved, less impressed, and like being involved in your life and pushing like and actually doing the things you say you're gonna do rather than just like being pressed by the things around you and like just talking the talk. Because I have a big tendency of coming up with ideas for videos and productions or like or any project and whatever, and I tell people about it, and then I get enough serotonin boost from just talking to people about it that
Mm.
I'm done. Like I don't need to actually do it. Like and I never end up doing it because I already get that little kick of like, "Oh, that's really cool. You should do that.
The
Oh, that's
the
awesome."
ENFP
Yes, the ego just
time
gets shot up and you're
challenge.
like, "Oh,
Mm.
cool." And then so I don't know. It's from this I think just seeing or reading about how he just like
He
went
doesn't
for it.
overthink.
No, he just does it. And
He
I'm
just
like, "How?" Like, how do you do that? Like, no, dude, I would be sitting there going like, what school should I go to? Can I do this? And like, will I make enough money? Do I have enough rent for the next 5 months? Like, he's just like, I'm going to film school. You're like, okay.
yeah, I thought the same thing. It's like, and of course he's painting his decisions on paper now. So I think that a ton of the sort of like the filler stuff is
Sure.
missing from
Of
the
course.
book, right? But at the same time, like I really do feel like after reading, it's still not the whole book yet since I'm like reading and not listening, but after understanding how his life progressed and where he is and getting a sense of that this really was a big key in his evolution and his ability to succeed. And it's like I'm wondering the same thing, like how did he just went for it. And he like even that example of when, so you mentioned he was going to law school, and then he is finishing preparing for an exam for law school, I assume. And he finds this book at his friend's place, and it's something about like a salesman, the perfect salesman or something like that, and he realizes the book is talking about the reader is the perfect salesman. And he gets so involved in this book, and the book advises him to, it's like one of the first tips it gives is practice good habits. And it comes to his mind that it's a good habit to not lie to himself. And he's been lying to himself where he really wants to tell stories for a living. It's like something he's been increasingly interested in over time. And so, yeah, at that point, he decides, like, I'm going to film school. And he immediately tells his, like, musters up the energy. He knows it's going to be difficult, so it's difficult even for him, right, to call his dad. He tries
Mhm,
to find the perfect timing. So I think it's not
mhm.
just like he has all this confidence that
Yeah.
it might come across, right? He's still doubtful of what
Yep.
his dad will say, and he's like
Mhm,
pacing back and forth. That sounds like from the depiction that he gives. And he figures out the right time to call his dad, where it's going to be most likely like he'll be in a relaxed state or whatever. And he calls him and he
mhm,
breaks the news to him, and his dad says, "Don't half-ass it." But I've had similar conversations with my dad where I changed my major, and at first did so without really telling my parents, but it was the right thing to do for me. But it took me a lot longer to come to terms with the decisions I had to make and to sort of face my fears and just like be open about it. Be like, this
Why?
is what I'm doing.
Why?
Why? I think the response that I would get is different. And I did
Terrifying.
get a different response. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't get the well half, just don't
Don't
half-ass
have
it.
it. Yeah. Mm,
So going back to what you were saying, I do think that that's a critical sort of. So I guess my question for us is, how do we now pivot to where we can put ourselves in a place to get those green lights, put ourselves in a place to get that, like, that
mhm,
confidence of just go for this thing and
mhm.
don't overthink, don't overanalyze, don't keep doubting yourself.
I think there's also another part that plays a lot into it that we may be overlooking of him being a very, very personable human being and very
Mm.
social. There's another book that I just recently listened to as well. It was The Cafe at the Edge of the World or Cafe on the Edge of the Universe or something like that. Are you familiar?
No.
I will send this to you. You would love this. It's perfect for this whole thing. Like the big message
I
in it
love
is
this. Future
yeah.
future episodes.
Yeah. It's very much about like figuring out what you're doing with life, like figuring out
Huh.
your next steps and whatnot. And one of the things that comes from that book, that's kind of rang true. Like, sorry to bring that book into this thing, but
No, that's
like that
great.
rang true. Was that when you talk about the things that you want to do, people and you're happy about it and you're excited about it and you're enthusiastic and feel very confident about the things that you're saying, other people get that energy from you
Mm-hmm.
and will subconsciously start helping you. Like if you start talking about how you want to get into coding and you've been doing like a bunch of like workshops and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden your friend goes, "Oh, right, I have a friend that's looking for a person to do an entry level coding position," and then it's just like it's he is, and bringing it back to McConaughey, like he's very talkative. He's a very social person, being that he was like the ladies' man in high school, meaning that he can
Mm.
he can smoothly talk to anybody. And the confidence that he has would not surprise me if he was able to like in every single circumstance that he could. Casually bring up the things that he wants to do in life and casually bring up the excitements that he has and the passions that he has, and that sets seeds in every single person that he talks to, and they tend to like him. So then like doing that whole thing meant that opportunities started to like move his way whether he acknowledged them or not, and kind of
So you know what? I think that I think that both of us have that. Like I know for me
of course
definitely when I'm really into something, I'm able to like bring people into the conversation very easily. But I think it's that inner critic that prevents me from being that actively social about the things that I'm pursuing.
sure, yeah. So again, that's probably
Yeah.
also part of him being like just
Well, he was
the
taught to fight for what,
yes, exactly,
right? Like you said, he's a
exactly.
fighter, but we didn't go into that. We didn't go into the whole, you mentioned his dad was a very, very macho man, but the idea of like proving you're a man by facing your dad at some point, beating him in a fight, and then that's when you
Hmm.
were seen as, respected. For
Yeah,
me, it was always like you need to be do what you need to do what you're told. You
yeah.
need to like this person knows what's
I'm
right
never
for
gonna
you. You
fight my
don't know.
dad.
I know you
Wait,
don't
what?
know what's right for yourself. So it's like that empowering of you, you, you know, for him like be a man, right? But like
Uh,
you be you, you, and stand up for it. Damn it, like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah, uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah, and he's
Don't
very
keep.
good at
I think his dad didn't want him to keep questioning him. Like he probably would hate that, right?
yeah,
Like
I mean, it's
why
annoying.
why the hell are you questioning it? Just go for it if that's what you want.
Anybody that spins their tires is a pain in the ass to be around. We all know that. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been around friends
Yes.
that just like keep saying that they're gonna do things and then never end up doing them, and like guilty as charged, But
Oh yes, I'm very aware of that for myself too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's still it's annoying for ourselves as well as from others as well, So,
Yeah. But
but
I also think, and this is something that we haven't chatted about yet, that and this was kind of like evident, I felt like an evidence kind of spiritual thread throughout the book where and it's part of the art of living where he navigates the situation that's in front of him, and he kind of figures out like the best thing to do in the moment or to do next. So, for
Mhm.
example, when he's in film school and he knows he wants to act, not act, sorry, he knows he wants to be in movies, right? He wants to do storytelling, he wants to tell stories, and he knows that he is not going, that Hollywood and the film folks in New York City, etc., don't care about your grades. And so
Mhm.
he kind of starts ditching class to go actually do gigs and find
Mhm.
those.
Mhm.
And again, there's that whole scenario where he tells the teacher, it's like looks the teacher in the eyes, like, I know the teacher's basically telling him, like, hey, you're going to fail if you keep skipping class. You can't do that. We need you to be in class. And he's like, you and I both know uh, they don't care about grades out there. They care about what you've done.
Mhm.
So let's make a deal. I'll show up to every exam and you just give me straight C's across the board, and the teacher doesn't even acknowledge it, right? So there's this whole like very very like confident thing too that
Mhm.
happening. Um, and then but my point is that he knows what he needs to do next to get his
Mhm.
foot in the door,
Mhm.
and he does that thing even if it's opposite of what the system is telling him to do.
Mhm.
And so he's kind of become like, it's very clear even early on, he's sort of like an expert in manipulating and gaming, like not gaming the system, but doing things in the way that he feels like he needs to do in order to get to where he needs to be, regardless of the other forces around him.
I,
And sometimes it's opposite too. Sometimes like he's in Hollywood and he's succeeded and he has to leave Hollywood in order to get his bearings straight, right?
yeah. Yeah, I feel like we all, I don't know about you, but I feel like we all kind of know what we're supposed to do. We all know what we should be doing. It's just taking that time to, one, not be anxious about everything that comes after that or like the next steps after that.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, the art of living, it just like that means like basic in and of itself is like being in the present moment and only
Yes.
worrying about what's happening right now. And when you're not able to do that, then like you can't necessarily do everything that is best for you in that specific point.
So at one point he also talks about how when he wants the first lead role in, what was the name of the movie again?
Oh,
A Time to Kill. A Time
time
to
to kill.
Kill. A
Yeah.
Time to Kill. And he hasn't had a lead role up until then. And so the film director is like, I can't give you the lead because we need to have a lead. But then all these things happen where it's not as important to have someone with the experience as a lead to be chosen as a lead for that movie. And so he he eventually gets the part, but then he has these little excerpts in the book throughout, Greenlights throughout the book, where I think they're sort of like messages from his journal at the time, or maybe like different musings or things like that. And so there's this one excerpt during that part of the film, sorry, that part of the book, where he talks about having a roof or having a ceiling, and
Mm-hmm.
that most of us sort of like operate with this kind of like fake man-made roof
Mm-hmm.
hanging over us, but then the roof is like a product of the mind. And just by living in the present, like what you just said, Alex, and like focusing on the present moment, we're not thereby like creating these extra roofs over our head artificially.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also talked at the start of, like, I think before we started recording today, like the world is artificially linear, right? Or these like artificial roofs that that we all walk around with. And I think that by it all comes back to, like, this is why this book is like a spiritual foundation to me. It all comes back to living in the present moment
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible, staying true to oneself, and using that guide to navigate, using like gut and heart, what's in front of us. And then the mind comes in, where we're like, okay, this is what our heart and gut are telling us that we want and to go for. And the mind comes in and like, how do I leverage what I have and what's around me to get there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the art of living. And then they're not always, there's sometimes blockages or like red lights or whatever, and then we kind of tune in. So I think we started having this conversation because you were talking about like how there's just a lot of stuff that we have to navigate through. So I have this another excerpt I'd like to read, and it's
Uh-oh.
called Why We All Need a Walkabout. And yes, a walkabout. And this comes from the part of the book where he goes to, so he's had his first taste of fame. Now all of a sudden he says like everybody in Santa Monica who by his favorite deli, like at first nobody knew him, and now like
Mm-hmm. But day
everybody
one and
knows
day two,
him.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was cool. I like that part. I like to like see like the crazy difference. Yeah, but
Do you want to
anyways,
recap that real quick? Do you
no,
remember it? Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, what happened was he starred in a movie with what was it, the A Date to
Sandra
Kill,
Bullock?
or was it the
Yeah, Time
Yeah,
to
she
Kill.
was, yeah, Time to Kill, with Sandra Bullock, and he like the day before it came out, he was a nobody, and he was just like walking into his deli, and then nobody paid attention to him, and the next day he walks in, and like everybody's like, oh, you're famous, like so. So it's just interesting to see how quickly overnight people can like just like the feeling. I don't know. It's weird. This guy. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Either way. Continue on.
Yeah, and I think actually he brushes over some of this in the book, is the feeling I got, maybe because he doesn't want to go too much into it, but it sounds like he had quite a bit of challenge in navigating that initial taste of fame and
Oh, I
success.
bet. Oh, I bet. I
Feeling
can't even
he
imagine. That is the one thing that always terrified me about, and might have
being
put a roof.
famous?
Being famous, yes. It like it always scared me because there's like a part of you you'll never be
Yes.
unfamous. You know what I mean? Like there's always going to be some sort of like I mean, if I was to do fame in one way, I'd want to be a one-hit wonder. I'd like to make all my money real quick, become a name, and then just be done with
Become
it.
a nobody again.
Yes, 100%. I want to live a normal life again, and with the ability to pay for everything for the rest of my life. That is the goal,
Oh,
to be able to be safe and secure, but and be able to have those connections, but then never touch the industry if I don't need to, and not have paparazzi up my ass, and like that I can. Oh, dude, it was always a fear. And also going with the roof thing, sorry to cut you off of like the
no,
thing that
this
we were
is
going towards,
fantastic.
but
Yeah.
like for like the roofs of our life, I could have
Uh,
pushed
like the
myself so
days of
much
our
harder.
lives.
Days of Our Lives. I was more of a Young and the
You said
Restless
that
fan,
one,
but that's
okay.
fine.
I didn't watch either of them.
My mom and I used to watch The Young and the Restless all the time, but that's another
Oh,
story. Um, what was I saying? Roofs of my life, like the rooftop, like people set standards for the lives that they live within, and I think a thing that I tended to do when it came to the YouTube game was I could never see myself, like I could imagine and dream that I wanted to be famous, and like I could have 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million subscribers, but when it came to like actually doing everything to get there was still a part of me that was like terrified of what would happen if I did. Um,
mm,
so it was like that whole feel. So I can't even imagine what he felt like the day after the ego boost
yeah.
instantly, especially being somebody that like was relatively social and popular and all that stuff. He probably had a nice little time of everybody like saying that he's great and having to
Yes.
really I mean, he did. What did he do? He went and spent some time with
At
like
the
some monks and shit.
monastery. That's
Yeah,
the why we all need a walkabout. That transitions so
please go
nicely.
for it. Wonderful.
So, yeah, noise to signal ratio. We are more constantly bombarded by unnatural stimuli than ever before. We need to put ourselves in places of decreased sensory input so we can hear the background signals of our psychological processes. As the noise decreases, the signals become clearer. We can hear ourselves again and we reunite.
So, what does that mean to you, Bria?
You
Because
know,
it's
this
a lot of
stood
big
out
words.
to me Right. So he calls it a walkabout, and it's sort of like a retreat, I think, from what's happening around you. And to go off of the conversation that we've been having. So this is exactly when this passage comes up, this like little snippet. This is him describing his retreat to that monastery in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
When he goes, so he probably had all of these, like you mentioned, like it's challenges navigating that instant, right? That fame and feeling like he mentions he felt like he didn't deserve it. He's a small town kid from Texas, like, dealing with all of this stuff that comes with being famous. And there could have been a number of ways that he handled it, right? Like you turn to drugs, you can turn to like too much alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
He chose to retreat
Yeah.
and yeah, and go find this like monastery in a desert he had heard about that apparently like anybody who goes, if you have to it's 13 miles off the main roads. You have to literally walk there. You can't drive because of the terrain. And so he did that. He did the 13-mile walk himself, arrived at the door of this monastery, and then got taken in by the monks. And then there sort of like retreated away from all of this input that he was getting. And I feel like that's the the position that I'm in right now. I think we were talking about before. So, there's these different like these different opportunities that have been coming up. There's different paths that I could be taking
Mm-hmm.
at this point in my life and my career. But I feel like there's been just so much external stimuli, so much stuff, so many voices coming at me over the
Mm-hmm.
last 6 months, last year and a half, that I've been feeling completely out of touch with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if I make decisions from that spot, they're probably not going to be the decisions that are right for me. And we just talked
Sure.
about sort of this like art of living. It's almost like gut led, it's heart led. He like goes for what he feels is right. But
Mm-hmm.
then what he also has shown us in the book is that at times where he can't tell what's right or he loses himself and he depicts those times. There's that time in Australia when he lived with the Dooleys as an exchange student. He gets really quiet and he removes himself from these like external things that are, fighting for his attention and maybe all these voices telling him
Mm-hmm.
this and that. And he figures out, there's a chapter in this book called Finding Your Frequency. He figures out his his frequency, like where he's at. He gets his clarity. He like tries to get his shit together. And then
Mm-hmm.
he comes back from out of that with a renewed sense of like heart or purpose or like gut feel of what he wants. Right. And so what's interesting to me about this is I think maybe the way that you and I have been operating, and maybe it's not you, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm also going off of like our conversation that we just had, is that by overthinking or overanalyzing things we want to do versus being more in the present and navigating like the opportunities that come with us from a gut center,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of like create these roofs that paralyze us from taking the steps that would that would get to that point. So for him, for instance, I didn't see any evidence that he was overly fearful of what fame would do to him at any
Mm-hmm.
point. Like he didn't even know he wanted to be an actor, right? He took that opportunity, navigated as the opportunity came up. And then
Mm-hmm.
he did it and he got to the next point and he got to the next point. And then he hit that part where he got this fame and then he retreated like I need to get away from this.
Mm-hmm.
um and then he came back. So part of me feels like maybe we have been creating artificial red and yellow lights just by with the thinking too much about certain fears about what could happen if we do this thing or what could happen if we do that thing. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, I used to have this mentality of do things and then tell people about them.
Mm,
But recently it's been the opposite, and that's been, like I was saying earlier, of creating those different, like, I set things up for myself, and then kind of create that in of itself kind of creates barriers, because then it creates a barrier in my own mind, because I'm already kind of done with the idea at that point. So when I knew as a kid, when I would used to do things like a project, or like a video or something, before I would show my excitement to other people about what I've made or what I've done, I'd make sure that the whole thing is done,
yeah.
and then hand it over. And then, but it's been a long time since I've done that, so it's just interesting. Um, just I don't know, that's something I haven't thought about in a long time. I used to try
Huh.
to bring it back, but it's very difficult not to, especially with like that whole mentality that I was talking about earlier from the other book, of like, when you tell people about things, then they know about it and they can help you, like, asking
Mm.
for help. Um, so maybe it's finding a happy medium of that,
I
to
think so too. Yeah. And I know for me, I also don't like saying no to people. That's something that I have to practice. And that's
yes.
something that um, Matthew seems to do well in the book is like make the decisions of when he wants to do something and when he doesn't want to do something. And when he doesn't want to do something, he is able to say no well. But
Hmm.
I'm always afraid of like hurting other people's feelings or coming across as like, I don't want to come across as flaky or anything like that. So I try to
Sure.
keep my commitments, even if they're not the best thing to do for me.
Correct.
So I think the art of saying no is equally important to this path and to success. But that's maybe someplace where that charisma is helpful because, I noticed in a number of situations in the book, like he doesn't just say like no, like in a bad, in an abrupt way. He figures
Hmm.
out how to how to recalibrate or like how to talk to people in a way that it's not going to ruffle too many feathers, but he's still
Hmm.
saying no, or he's still
Hmm.
getting what he wants. With that
Hmm.
example of his like teacher at law school, or not film school, where that worked out, and other examples as well in the book. So kind of uses his charisma to find the best to say no in the best way possible, it
Yeah,
seems.
I know. I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of the fear of saying no comes with the fear of people not being happy with you saying no, and then having to deal with that. That's my biggest thing. So being able to get past
Yeah.
that, I feel like, would be and he seems to be fine. Like I said, like or like you just said with the guy from film school, he literally was like, "How would you give me C's?" And the guy didn't say anything. I could not. I'd have to know.
Right.
I'd have to know. I would not leave that office without knowing whether or not that was a shaken
Or if
pan
I
deal
did
or
leave the
not.
office, I'll be thinking about it for the next like
Yeah, I'm
a
like, well, I'm gonna
100 hours.
fail. Yeah, well, I'm failing. I'm gonna be done. This is the
I'm gonna
best.
be miserable. Did I
Send
make the wrong choice? Like I should have gone for that. I should have done
send up
this. I should
send
have.
4 follow-up emails. Like, are you sure? Did you think about what I said?
So what's the difference there?
What's the difference there?
Yeah, like
Uh,
how come
he's more confident in himself and the outcome, apparently. I mean, that's kind of he's just very confident and just like it'll work out. It has to some extent, right? I don't know. Blindly leap of faithing his life. Oh, I'm so sorry. Ugh.
no
Ugh.
worries. Ah,
Blindly
so
leap of faithing his life.
leap of faithing life. And maybe not, it's not blindly. He's led by his inner voice.
True. It's a very
He
nice inner voice
You
too.
know what? You know what? He trusts himself.
He does trust himself. Do you
He
trust
trusts
yourself, Priya?
himself. No, not like he
Oh
does.
no, not like he
Mm,
does. No, no,
not
no.
like he does.
Now, do you trust yourself more than others?
No, I trust other people more than myself. I think that's a big
Really?
issue. Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting.
Mhm.
See, I
Mhm.
trust myself to do things more than I trust other people to do them. I'd rather just do it.
Oh no. So okay. So I trust myself to do things, but
So what part?
I oftentimes tend to trust other people's opinions of things more than my own. I
Oh,
feel
of
like they're
course.
more qualified.
Okay, so yes,
Even
there you go.
opinions for myself,
I think
right?
positive, yeah, affirmation or like, what is it? What's the word? When somebody like tells you you can do something
And
and like
he was told that,
encouragement. Yeah, the
encouragement.
encouragement.
He was told
Yeah,
that. He was like, "You're a like you're a winner. Like you,
yeah.
this is yours. Like you."
Mhm. Mhm. Life
So
is
we
yours, so
should.
take it.
Life is yours, so take it. I like
Yeah.
that.
Life
We
is
should
yours, so
keep
take it.
reminding. We should keep reminding ourselves of that. Yeah.
All right. So overall, though, would you recommend this book, Priya?
I think you know my answer to that.
No, you wouldn't. You hate it. After beating this this book off for the last hour, you're like, nah.
Oh my gosh, I would totally recommend this book.
Why?
I am definitely going to continue delving into it, probably read it again, I'm sure. I really want to look at I have like a ton of notes and takeaways from the book. So I'm going to aggregate those two and I'll share them with everybody in the show notes as well. Just it's my tool. And maybe it'll be helpful to others too. But I think this passes our criteria for the Yeasayer stamp of approval. What do you think?
Yes, I think so too. I mean, I'd recommend it. I like it, especially if you're a young man growing up in your 20s. Like, even if you are philosophical about like trying to figure out your life or not, it's still nice to see as somebody that is a. Here's what I wrote. Of all the people from Texas, Matthew seems to be the most accepting of the right-leaning individual, like the most
Is this
accepting.
your critique of the book?
This is my
That
critique of the
sounds so
book.
professional.
Matthew seems to be the most accepting of the right-leaning individuals. So for the hardcore liberals out there, he has some really genuine takes on life from my personal perspective. And seeing that from somebody who claims the South as much as he does is rather refreshing. So especially being in as heavy of like a political climate as we have, and like I was very, very big into politics for the longest time, and you can tell how much into politics I am now that I don't live in the country anymore. I said peace
Yeah.
out. But it's nice to have somebody that grew up in a very conservative area and
And so our
still.
audience knows you moved from the US to Berlin and are now
Correct.
living in
I am now
Berlin.
in
And I live
Germany.
in California. Yeah.
There you go. So
Okay.
it's just it's a nice little, it's a best of both worlds things because he shows throughout the book, and I've always kind of had the feeling that he was a genuine dude. So seeing that it came to life within this book of like somebody that did grow up in a really conservative area and being able to move through life rather liberally, it's very refreshing, and it was very nice to watch, to listen to and see and take and feel confident about taking notes from this. Like there was no part of me that was like, this guy sounds like a dick. Like, and he
Yeah.
might have been to some
Yeah.
extent. Like there he might have been at certain parts, like especially being as confident as he is in
Yeah.
the film industry, you got to push people down sometimes, and I believe that.
Yeah.
So, but like all in all, a lot of what I took from it, like being as to why I would recommend it, it was nice to see. So, but as for the stamp of approval, shall we go through what it takes to get a Yeasayer's stamp of approval, Priya?
Let's do it. Let's do
Let's do
it.
it. Okay, so the first one. Does it have a depiction of overcoming a struggle?
Yes, it has several depictions of that.
Okay, all right. Can you name me one?
The example is the one that we just talked about, where he is kind of struggling to handle all this like instant fame that he has, and he has to retreat several times in order to figure out what to do with all of that input.
Perfect. Give it a check. Boom. Does it give you a new way of looking at or approaching life? Does it provide you, as a person who has consumed the words from the book, a new way of looking at slash approaching life?
You saw that?
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Don't worry. Jerk.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it definitely does. Like I think the whole
So too.
concept of the art of living and navigating green lights and thinking about life in that way is a new approach for me. It's and some of like the ways that he handles and navigates situations and challenges that happen, he uses different tactics and approaches than I would. So definitely a lot that I can, for me personally, that I can take away from that.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Definitely not half-assing life and taking those green lights
Hmm.
as they come. New way of approaching life. Like I said, I read the book twice, so obviously I like it to some extent.
You mean
So,
listened?
boom. That shh. Stop bringing that up. The third one is does it cause self-reflection? Has this, I mean, I feel that's literally what this whole podcast is
Yeah.
about. So it has caused
If
some
we can
sort of,
talk about it, if we can cover an episode, then yes.
yeah. So there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Engaging, does it leave a lasting impression? Is it memorable? I mean, we can call back to the dualies quite a bit. So yes.
We can. We won't talk about them now, but the Doolies. If you haven't read the book, read the book or listen to it, and you'll know what we're talking about.
It's the best part of that. That was a. It's not the best part, but it was definitely. I liked. Oh, we never got into this, but one of my favorite parts of the book was when he went to Africa and was just like wrestling. Did you get to that part yet?
I have not gotten to
All
that
right, then I'm
part
not gonna say
yet.
a thing. I'm not gonna say a thing.
Okay,
There you go.
okay,
You're gonna enjoy that one. So engaging,
okay.
absolutely. And then
We'll
do
do
we
a 1 point a recording 1.8 or something.
1.85? Yeah.
Yes, 1.8512.
One,
Okay.
two, seven, six. And the final criteria point of whether or not it gets the Yeasayer stamp of approval. What is so funny for him?
Kind of
Is it my
nerdy.
hand?
I like
Is
that.
it my
No,
hand movements?
no, it's a 1.8512 whatever.
Dude, that was fun. Is that what got you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, did this with the 1.857632? Did it make you walk away feeling empowered? Do you feel empowered, Priya, to change your life and to listen to the words of Mathew McConaughey and really give yourself green lights?
I feel empowered to use the tools that he's provided and to start thinking about life differently in order to pursue what I want. Yeah.
So does that mean that we give green lights by
Well,
Matthew McConaughey?
what's your answer to that question?
Walk away feeling empowered. Yeah, I think so.
I feel
I
like this
mean,
yes is a little bit weaker for us, right? It is a yes, but it's like
yeah, that's like a half
it's,
yes. Like I'm not empowered to, like, it's not gonna make me go want to change the world, but it is a nice little new. It does provide me with a new perspective of like
yeah,
certain ways that I could be approaching the different challenges in my life. So empowered is a strong word, but
yeah.
I'll turn the other cheek for that one, just so we can stamp it. So are we giving it
Stamp,
a stamp? Are we stamping that approval?
stamp.
Stamp. Boom. All right. Matthew
Um,
McConaughey, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's such an
welcome to the
honor.
Yaysayers approval. Stamp of
Yeah,
approval club.
yeah, what do we gotta call
Tribe.
that? We
He calls it
gotta
a tribe.
He calls it a tribe? Who calls it a tribe?
No, well, Matthew McConaughey talks about tribes in his book.
So,
Something like you
welcome to
find
the
your
tribe.
tribe of like shared values and
So is this our
stuff
tribe?
like
Is
that.
this what is Are we gonna base all of our inside jokes off of this off of Matthew McConaughey's? Are we gonna have
Tribe,
green lights and
green
tribe
light.
and
We'll be doing green light throughout the whole the podcast. Why not? Green
probably
light.
green light, green light. Perfect. All right. Well, then that. Congratulations, Matthew McConaughey. You got the stamp of approval, and that
Congratulations,
wraps up.
Matthew McConaughey. Congratulations to us for wrapping up our first episode of
I know.
Yeasayers, where we say yes to success and give it a green light.
Green light.
Green-
Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you'd like to hit that follow button or subscribe button or whatever it is on whatever app you're listening to, that would be fantastic. And if you want to come back next time for the next book that we read, we kind of try to keep each of these episodes their own stagnant one so that you can just go and enjoy all of them at any single point in time ever. But
but we
yeah,
will
so
be
go do
doing
that.
more of these. And we have a wonderful list of books
Mhm.
and authors that we are very excited to learn more about and learn more from, hopefully.
Correct.
So we'll see you in the next episode. And thank you so much for joining us for this episode 1.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you next
Thanks.
time.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye.